This is Lucky Lynx continuing the series on Is There a Magical War Going On in the World? Coming up right after this.
That's unexpected. I must say, you fight well.
Now put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Okay, so I'm going to try to keep this one short because I want to get right to this question for you guys to consider. Continuing with the subject that we've been talking about in the previous videos, about 4 or 5 videos now, on do you believe there's a magical war going on? Would it explain things in your life, in the world, if there was magic happening behind the scenes that were creating some kind of magical war? Someone said something on one of the last videos. They said about certain kinds of religions, they said something to the effect of they promise you heaven, but then they bind your eyes so that you cannot see, which I thought was brilliantly put. And for any of you who've ever read the story or heard the story of the Monkey King, they say it's a Buddhist story, but the story's been manipulated. And the Monkey King had all these incredible powers, and they bound his third eye to try to force him to do something. Now, the story's been manipulated in to support Buddhist doctrine, but they literally bound his eye to his third eye with this this ring to prevent him from being able to see, do magic, and have the power that he had. He was an incredibly accomplished, powerful being, and he was bound to stop that power by forces that did not want him to be powerful. That idea, I think, is kind of I want that to be sort of the underlying idea here. My question is, why do you suppose there's so many hypocritical religions out there, religious practices out there? For example, the Catholics tell people that magic is wrong, and someone else brought this up, and I'd like to point this out. Thank you to the person who brought this up. Someone brought this up in the comments of one of the last videos. They'll say that magic is evil and that you go to hell for doing it, but then they pretend on their altars to do magic themselves. They also pretend to be able to do exorcisms and things like that. And isn't it interesting that they claim or pretend to be able to do magic, but they tell other people that doing magic is evil? That's the first thing. There was another experience I had where I was actually in a Catholic cemetery while I was working on my book on cemeteries, and in the basement of this mausoleum, there were all these pictures on the wall. I didn't understand. It was really weird. There was like, the wall had these like paintings on them. And on the wall, there were these paintings of skulls and dice and flames and things that are actually wrathful offering objects in the Tibetan Bon practices. But they're on the wall in this mausoleum. Now, why would they have pictures of dice? There was this painting, and there was like pictures of dice and snake and skulls and things. We see the dice as wrathful and divinatory objects. I use them. Those of you who've seen me use the dice to create Tibetan kill cores. In Bon, we create a map of a person's life using colored dice. But here's this Catholic cemetery that has these things on the wall, and they don't even necessarily know how to use them for divination. Then there's these philosophies or these bestsellers in the current, I'm going to call it, I guess, the consciousness movement, where they preach against duality, but then at the same time they say, well, everything should be love, or it's all love, and this other stuff is lower. Well, that's duality. So they're preaching against duality, and their entire set of philosophies is pinned on duality. Not to mention the fact that they call things laws. They say, well, there's the law of this, the law of that, the law of that. There's no law. They're not laws. These laws are not established in any old texts or old traditions. These are something that they came out with and labeled it a law so that it sounded more legitimate. Then you have the Buddhists who claim that discursive thought is bad, but everything they do is fight and argue in discursive. There's all discursive thought. And I'm going to add to religions academia, because I believe it's just as much a part of the religion stuff as anything else. You got a bunch of people who are teaching stuff that is being proved wrong constantly. Stuff about the sciences, stuff about history, stuff about archaeology, stuff about where the world came from. There is stuff currently being discovered in the world that tells us that our view of history is completely wrong. And still they continue to teach the same things. For example, the whole idea of slaves building the pyramids, it is being figured out that is impossible. That the way that the Great Pyramids and the pyramids were built, the fact that also there are pyramids all over the world, in every area of the world, contradicts what they're teaching in terms of history. But if you ask academics, and those of you who go into if you go into the arts and liberal arts, it's insane what they do. I was at a college that actually used hypnosis to try to get people to start to write, but they didn't even know what they were doing. And if you would tell them you're using hypnosis and you're actually creating problems, oh no. So when you contradict them, anything that threatens their ivory tower or anything that threatens, and as someone who was in academia and watched it firsthand, they don't want anyone to threaten the world, which means they would have to go out in the world and interact with people, and they don't want anyone threatening their catered lunches or their status. Also, in line with religions, I'd say there's certain food movements out there where people say, well, I'm going to adopt this for peace, this method of eating for peace, and then they go out and start fighting with people. So, well, I'm trying to embrace higher consciousness in my eating habits, but they spend all day fighting with people about the food they eat. So, my question is, all of these religious systems, philosophies, and structures that are in place, why do you believe it is that they are there's so much hypocrisy, but still there are people who defend them, believe them, practice them, and try to convince everyone else to believe as they do that they are right? Do you believe there may be some magic behind it that is either some being or beings that are feeding on this, or something in the magic that is actually working to create a glamour? Now, you guys know what a glamour is. A glamour is something that, so for example, let's say you're at a party and you're drinking and you got ice and suddenly you see like cockroaches coming out of the ice or eyeballs coming out of the ice. It would be a glamour to make you believe that was there. That famous scene. Do you remember the scene in Lost Boys where he's eating the noodles, and the one guy says to him, he goes, "Hey, you're eating maggots," and he looks down and he thinks they're maggots, but then he looks back and they're noodles again. That's a glamour. A glamour can also make you appear one way, so like the old fairies would use in the old stories of fairy tales where a fairy would come and she would transform into an old woman or an old man. That'd be a glamour. So it makes you believe something is happening, or something appears a certain way, something is. So maybe, what if there's a glamour over this that's making people believe that it's one thing when in actuality it's another? Or there is some kind of magical something that's working on people's minds in addition to the stuff relating to the mind, hypnosis, mind control, stuff like that, which I've actually seen. Stockholm Syndrome, which is a big one. Yes, all of those things. But do you believe perhaps there is a magical component behind it as well, and that some being or beings may be feeding on and or benefiting from creating these systems that are not only feeding people, but they're creating a hypocrisy that people are not only not acknowledging, but that they are defending? Put your thoughts, put your questions, put your comments in the thing below. And let's continue this conversation. I have this feeling that this concept is about to blow up and get kind of big. I'm continuing with it, and it feels as though something very large is going to come out of it. So I'm very interested to see what's going to come out of this. People are giving some very interesting comments. They're noticing some very interesting things, and the subject seems to be hitting people pretty deeply. So I'm very interested to continue this conversation. Hypocrisy. Why do you believe people are embracing the hypocrisy in these religions, in these traditions, in these, if for nothing else, they're praying or doing magic and nothing is changing in their life, and still they embrace it. Why? What's feeding on them? This one is so obvious. You'll see people embracing a system and they're miserable, their relationships are off, they're poor, they have nothing, but still they cling to whatever magic they're doing or invocations or prayers or the religion that's keeping them down, which seems on the surface like Stockholm Syndrome, and I would agree. However, do you believe that maybe there's some magic behind that that might be feeding on that as well? Hey, if you would like to get a reading from me, 779-302-8009, and we will set something up, or you can email me at conjurehope@gmail.com. And if you would like to learn how to read these babies, these are the Mexican Loteria. I have a class in Mexican Loteria. I have a class in Basic Tarot. I have a class in Intermediate to Advanced Tarot. I have 2 in Lenormand, one that's basic, one that's a Grand Tableau. And then there's a crystal ball one, crystal ball scrying one, and then there's one on how to read playing cards. So if you're interested in any of these, contact me, 779-302-8009, or conjurehope@gmail.com. And hey, for all of those of you who have donated, I appreciate the donations. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you. If you like these videos, they're making you think, and you want to donate to help keep them coming, please, I will put my PayPal and my Venmo below. Please feel free. And hey, subscribe. Share these videos everywhere. Let everyone know about this subject, because I want people to start talking about it more and more and more, and thinking about it more and more and more. And then when you subscribe, hit the little bell so you can be notified when new videos come out. So why do you think it is that people are embracing, clinging to things that are not only are not working, but are they hypocritical in the way they approach things? Do you think perhaps there's some magic behind them that's actually making people not only cling to them, but fight to the death over whatever it is? In some cases, they just want to cling to it. They just want to embrace it further. Why? Why do you think that is?